We'd like to reconvene the meeting. Need to update the roll to indicate that all board members minus Robin are present. All board members of cabinet are present. Our next item for discussion and motion with action is under personnel, the approval of standard evaluation system for teachers. Dr. Oh, thank you.
I'll move that the governing board approve consent agenda items A through C in accordance with policy BEDB-R.
Second.
Our consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Back on track, our educational services item is the approval of the 2012-2013 K4 performance criteria. Dr. Boyle.
Mr. Scott Walmer is here this evening to present information to you on the pay for performance criteria for the 2012-13 school year and will answer any questions. Mr. Walmer.
Mr. President, members of the board, good evening. Tonight we have an action item to approve the 12-13 pay performance plan. That would be the plan that is currently being earned by staff and would be paid out in November 2012. So there was a committee to do that. They met twice. And we'll discuss those meetings a little bit, review the process they went through, and briefly touch on some of the guidelines that are coming in future years that we'll have to address.
Scott, I'm somewhat confused. Did you say it was paid out already, or is it November 13 that it will be paid out?
No, pay performance is earned in one fiscal year and it's paid out 5 months later in November. So the plan that's in place right now will be paid next November, and the plan that you're being asked to approve tonight is currently being earned. It's the year's half over, and so this is the one that will be in place that they will be paid upon next November. The measurements in this plan will be used to pay out next November.
Okay, so they were already paid last month.
The check they received last month was
Okay.
for the plan that you approved last December.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, it's really confusing. When we start talking about this plan, we have to spend 5 minutes. Okay, this is the plan that's going to be in effect here and be paid here. It's let's have to repeat that. So that committee has some guiding principles to ensure that people can speak freely and honestly and address difficult questions. Pay for performance is funded by classroom site fund dollars, and that money is a 0.6% sales tax that was approved in 2001 by voters. That money comes in and is divided into 3 buckets. The 20% base pay and the 40% called menu items are all in our teacher's salary schedule. So that 40% menu item bucket could have been used for some different kinds of programs. This school district chose to pay it all out for teacher compensation. The last 40% is required to be paid out as a pay for performance plan, a pay for performance payment based upon criteria. That's what we're establishing here tonight. And it's important to remember that 40%, because later on we're going to talk about 33% of the 40%, and when we say that, we're talking about 30%, the 33% of this 40% of the whole classroom site fund total. So in 2010, 2012, as has been true all along, 60% of those monies go into base pay and 40% go out to teacher pay for performance. This is simply the cover page of the plan. And the plan is in your board docs. This is the 12-13 criteria. It was approved last year and no changes were made this year. This is the 12,000 for next year, but this committee approved no changes in the plan for the current year. And these criteria are on pages 7 and 8 of the plan that you have available to you. This sheet here is a review of the November 2012 payout. One of the things the committee did was to look at that against performance district-wide to see if the way the payout panned out made sense up against student achievement. And that committee agreed that it did. Next, they looked at the rubric and determined, this is an ADE rubric, and so we looked at the different requirements and asked ourselves how far along we were with that requirement. Was it implemented? Was it being implemented? Or did we have no evidence that was there? And that's what those X's are. And so the ones that got lower marks will be addressed by the committee next year. So on this page, everything was fine on the first page. The second page had a few that will be addressed in the plan that is earned in 13-14. So here's the next steps for that committee. Mostly to get some feedback from district-wide staff and return with recommendations for the 13-14 criteria. So in 14-15, there's some new requirements coming from the state. And this is, these changes mandate that a third of that 40% be tied directly to student achievement. And so that'll be the question that has to be asked: what kind of report do we use? You know, what our measurements are going to be to tie performance directly to payout of the pay for performance plan. And here's the timeline for that. So the 12-13 criteria, that's what's happening now.
Question.
Uh-huh.
Scott,
Mm-hmm.
I know that the teachers haven't gotten a raise since the recession hit, what it's called the recession. So it's about 5 years approximately, 4 or 5 years, 4 years, okay. We had a presentation a couple, 3 board meetings ago. If we go off the so-called financial cliff, curb, slope, whatever you want to call it, how it's going to impact Creighton financially. If that does happen and we lose a lot of federal monies, is that going to affect pay? It won't affect, I know the formulas, but will it affect the actual monies going to the teachers?
It won't affect pay for performance because that's a dedicated revenue stream funded by sales tax, so it's not federal monies in any way. And the money that comes in for this can only be used for that one purpose, and there's no option about it. The sequestration, if that were to happen, would impact funds like Title I,
Right.
and we would have to determine, you know, what happens to those programs. Can we find alternative funding, or do they have to be reduced?
Because the M&O funds, teacher salaries, and sequestration would be federal, which would not be M&O.
2 slides ago, Scott, just processing the recommendations for the school year 2014-2015.
Yeah.
So the individual teacher performance as measured by the teacher's performance, is that, I guess that's for the board to decide, is that like what we get from our evaluation system, or is there directions on that?
In the end, yes, that'll be a governing board decision. So I assume information will be brought from that committee, and yeah, that'll be decided here.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walmer, can you help me to just clarify this? So what we do every December is approve a performance pay plan, which we're doing right now, which is paid for with Prop 301 sales tax money. And then you mentioned in your presentation two of the items that are coming up on our agenda, I think, or one of the items, which is the standards evaluation system for teachers. Is that what you're talking about in future years in 2014, 15, et cetera?
No, that's
Is that something completely different?
That's different.
Dr. Lugo addressed that
I-
question.
I thought it was, but the ears sounded familiar.
Another agenda item, two more agenda items will be coming forth for the standard teacher and principal evaluation system that at this time is not directly linked to the pay for performance plan. In the future, we foresee some links going to that plan based on the changes in the law.
Will that money, maybe I should be asking it at that point, is that money pay for performance? Well, there's an evaluation system is what would be setting up tonight in that next agenda item. Is there money tied to that in terms of what teachers are paid in future years?
Okay, the evaluation system that's coming forth this evening is not directly tied to performance-based monies except for on the principal evaluation. It is tied to monies should a teacher be let go from their position, but it remains the same at this time. In the future, in 2013-14, it's my understanding that the governing board must adopt policies which account for 33% of the 40% for pay for performance to be directly related to teacher performance.
So right now, the Prop 301 money that comes in is certainly taken a hit in the last few years. So in addition to our teachers losing stipends, having higher money for retirement costs, losing career ladder, blah, 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 they've probably seen a reduction in the pay for performance Prop 301. But what do we expect that to run for teachers?
Last year, teachers got a maximum of $1,100. This year it was a maximum of $1,500. Sales taxes have begun to rebound. At the end of this year, we'll have a little bit of surplus in that 60% of other. Those monies carry a no supplant clause, so we can't offset M&O expenditures with that. So that basically can only be used for teacher pay increases in the future.
And when we're talking about the 33% of the 40%, what does that work out to? Is the $1,500 you mentioned the 40%, or is that?
Yeah, so the maximum teacher could get this year was $1,500 based on a number of criteria. In the future, I guess $500 of that would have to be tied to student achievement.
Okay. So then the next question, which may be more of an issue, or maybe a question for Dr. Wagner and Dr. Boyle, is there any evidence that tying $500 of performance pay to performance actually affects the performance of the teacher? And I realize this isn't something that's a district policy, it's a state policy, but okay. You can.
I expect that
rhetorical.
$1,500 to increase a little bit in the coming years.
Do you know what the average payout was this year?
I don't, but you may have that. The November 2012 payout was in the show here.
Oh.
toward the bottom.
Total, yeah, bottom right, the third column from the right in the bottom section.
Thank you.
And Mr. Ballmer, what, you mentioned 1,500, 1,200. Do you remember off the top of your head what it might have gotten down to if we got to the recession? I want to say it was less than 1,000, but I could be wrong on that.
I don't remember being less than 1,000. I think it was 1,100 was
Okay.
rock bottom, I believe.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have a motion?
Move the governing board approve the pay for performance criteria for the 2012-13 school year to be submitted to ADE by December 31st, 2012.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Our next item under personnel is the approval of the